birth of electric vehicle. Introduced more than 100 years ago, electric cars are seeing to rise in popularity today for many of the same reasons they were popular. Whether it's a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or all-electric, the demand for electric cars will keep continuing to rise. As a matter of fact, rising as 6.6 million cars each year are being sold extra. The birth of the electric vehicle. In the early past century, innovators in Hungary, the Netherlands, and the United States started trying to come together are really expensive. Worldwide by 2020. It's hard to pinpoint the invention of the electric car to one inventor or century. Instead, it was a series of breakthroughs, from the battery to the electric motor, and finally, in the 1900s, the electric car. The early rise and fall. In the early 1900s, people didn't know whether electric cars are going to go up or gasoline cars are going to go up. But even though electric cars, with a little bit more effort, could easily dominate gasoline cars, it wasn't like today, where you have a power outlet almost anywhere you go. Power outlets were only reserved for the wealthy. And if you really wanted a power outlet, you could only find it in your nearby library. I don't think you can charge your car at a library. You can't. At first, people thought steam was going to go off. But then gasoline cars were invented by Mercedes-Benz. So they thought gasoline cars were going to go up. Then suddenly, some guy thought that if you put a battery and an electric motor together, it makes an electric car. And then suddenly, they thought electric cars were going to go up. Then somehow, gasoline cars came up. So that's why. And then now, with the gas crisis in the 1970s in the US, people were trying to look for other alternatives for cars. Some looked at solar panel cars, some looked at steam-powered cars, but the most popular version was an electric car. For example, the Ferdinand Porsche, founder of sport car company by the same name, developed an electric car called P1 in 1898. Around the same time, it was the world's first hybrid electric car. And a matter of fact, it was dominated the gas engine. But sadly, because you couldn't find power outlets wherever you go, it was, not a success. It was more like a fail. So he switched on to making gasoline cars. By 1912, the gasoline car only cost for $650, while an electric roadster sold for $1,750. That's the olden days $1,750. That's more like $50,000, and the gas car was $25,000. So easily, electric cars were super expensive. That's why they're reserved for the rich, not the poor. So basically, if it's a $60,000 car, electric cars were like $130,000. Over the next 30 years, like I said, fast forward to the early Arab oil embargo, created growing interest in lowering the U.S. dependence on foreign oil and finding homegrown sources of fuel. Congress took note and passed what we know as the Electric Car Bill. And fast forward again. So the first cars looked like this, and some cars looked like a bullet. These were the early days of the 1930s and 40s when people really experimented. And sometimes it was just a big battery in the front, a nickel battery, not a lithium battery, and in the back was a tiny electric motor. This meant the car was going to be really low powerful, but it was going to have lots of miles. And here are some of the 1960s cars, 1970s cars, the 80s cars, the 90s cars, the 2000s early sports car electric cars, the 2010s, 2015, and another 2016, finally the 2020 Roadster, which is $36,000. So how do these cars work? So here we have, there's a charger, batteries, control, and electric motor. Like I said, for example, there's also a motor. So the electric motor, there's basically what this is. Energy flows through the electric motor and powers it up. And there's a controller, which is basically like the gear throttle, gear switch to go left or right. There's the charger here, the controller, it's basically the gears, the battery, which is basically the fuel source. And the problem with electric cars is that, unlike gasoline cars, you can just fill your engine up in like 10 seconds. Electric cars take 10 minutes, more like 10 hours. So that's